Episode 1, Bases Loaded. To get this book adaptation courtroom drama started, we meet Rusty Sabich, a hotshot Chicago prosecutor talking to a jury and stating the responsibilities a prosecutor has to the court and to the district attorney's office. When he gets home later that day, he receives a call from his best friend Ray, who tells him that Carolyn Polimis was just found murdered in her apartment. Carolyn was another prosecutor in the Chicago DA's office, and Rusty tells his wife, Barbara Sabich, the news as well. When Rusty gets to the scene, he finds Carolyn's body tied up with ropes in a position he knows he's seen before. In the office the next day, Raymond Horgan, the current district attorney and Rusty's best friend, tells the office that Rusty will be the chief prosecutor for Carolyn's murder case, which upsets Molto and Della Guardia. Nico Della Guardia is running for district attorney in the current election against Raymond, and Tommy Molto is his right-hand man, similar to how Rusty is to Raymond. At her memorial, Rusty is shocked to learn that Carolyn had a son she never told any of them about. That night, Rusty is looking over the case files, and he remembers a case in the past that he and Carolyn co-counseled on, and the girl that was killed, Bunny Davis, was tied up in the exact same way as Carolyn was, so Rusty believes the murders might be related. But a man named Liam Reynolds was arrested and found guilty for that murder, and he's rotting away in prison, so he couldn't have killed Carolyn. But when Rusty and a colleague, Rigo, go talk to him, he says he had nothing to do with it. Rusty then goes to visit Carolyn's ex-husband, Dalton Caldwell, and her son, Michael Caldwell, who say they weren't close to Carolyn and haven't spoken in years. The following night, Rusty talks to Barbara, and this is when we learn Rusty was having an affair with Carolyn, and it went on and off for years, but Barbara stayed with him through it all. A few months pass, and Nico Della Guardia wins the election for district attorney, and the first thing he does is take Carolyn's case away from Rusty and gives it to Tommy Molto, as Molto is now his chief deputy prosecutor, which angers Rusty. The following morning, Raymond and Rusty meet with Nico and Molto confronts Rusty about his affair with Carolyn, and he tries to deny it, but they sniff it out. A bombshell is then dropped on Rusty as Molto tells Rusty Carolyn was pregnant, and they believe it was his child, giving him motive to kill her. Episode 2, People vs. Rozat Sabich. Rusty can't believe what he just heard, and Raymond is furious with him because he kept this from him, and Raymond believes he will never get reelected after this, and his career is basically over. When Molto asks Rusty for a paternity test, Rusty tells him to go get a warrant. And when Rusty gets home and tells Barbara, she is not pleased with him, as he continued to see Carolyn even after he said they broke it off a year ago. Barbara then tells Rusty he must tell their two kids the truth as they need to hear it from him. They have a daughter, Jaden Sabich, and a son, Kyle Sabich, who are both in their upper teens. And they are heartbroken when they learn their dad cheated on their mom for numerous years and even got her knocked up. The following morning, the police show up with a warrant to search his house and take his DNA, which he didn't expect to happen as he was a prominent figure in the community. Rusty goes to Raymond, who is still upset with him, but asks Raymond to be his lawyer because he is the best lawyer he knows. Raymond is hesitant, but Rusty says the evidence is going to look pretty damning because he admittedly was obsessed with Carolyn and didn't take too kind to her recently breaking up with him, but swears he didn't kill her. Raymond says he will think about it, and later, his wife tells him he shouldn't do it after what Rusty did to his career, but Raymond does tell her it would be nice to get a win against Molto and Della Guardia. At his house that night, Rusty receives a call from Rigo, and the DNA test came back, and the baby was in fact Rusty's. The police then show up and arrest him on suspicion of first-degree murder. The following day at his pretrial conference, Raymond appears and will represent his best friend in court. Judge Little sets a trial date, and Rusty is allowed to go home on bond. The episode ends with Rusty receiving an unknown number text telling him, "You were there, I saw you," which scares Rusty because he didn't think anyone knew he was at Carolyn's house the night of her death. Episode 3, Discovery. Rusty shows Barbara the text and confesses he was at Carolyn's house the night she died, but once again pleads his innocence. She doesn't know what to believe and walks off. In the morning, Rusty shows Raymond the text, and he also is upset he held that information from him, but Rusty says he is going to meet this person and see what they want and what they know. When he gets there, he is met by Michael Caldwell, who claims to have pictures and videos of Rusty at his mother's house that night, and when Rusty asks to see them, Michael says he already handed them over to the police. He just wanted to see his mother's killer face to face, so that is why he lured him there. Later, both parties meet in the judge's chambers, and Judge Little is not happy that the prosecution didn't include these pictures and videos in the discovery files, and tells them to send them immediately to avoid punishment. That night, the Sabiches are eating dinner, and Jaden asks her father what they have on him, and he says it is mostly just circumstantial at best, and they don't have any hard evidence he killed her, which he explains is because he didn't do it. Kyle brings up possibly accepting a plea deal, but Rusty shuts that down immediately because he's not going to prison for something he didn't do. Elsewhere, Nico and Molto are discussing the case, and Nico thinks Molto might have an unhealthy obsession with seeing Rusty go down, and he thinks there's something going on that Molto isn't telling him. A few days later, Raymond hires a second defense lawyer to try the case with him, Maya Winslow, and they all sit down to go over the case. Rusty lays out how the affair started, what happened during and how it ended, and it ended pretty badly because he loved her and wanted to be with her, but she had other plans. Rusty then says they should look more into the Bunny Davis case and the similarities, but Raymond says there's nothing there. Liam Reynolds is in prison and there's no other leads. When Rusty gets home, he looks at the pictures Michael took, and he sees himself at Carolyn's house, but also a hooded figure there as well, who he realizes is his son, Kyle Sabich. Episode 4. The Burden. Rusty sits down with Kyle and asks him why he was outside Carolyn's house the night she died. Kyle says he found out about the affair a few months ago, and he wanted to know why Rusty picked her over Mom. That's it. But Rusty isn't satisfied with that answer, and it causes a fight between Rusty and Barbara. The following day, Molto meets with Michael and asks him why he was outside his mom's house that night if they rarely talk to each other, and Michael says he checks in on her from time to time. He does say he had lunch recently with her, and during lunch, she told him she was scared of a guy she worked with, and Michael assumed it was Rusty, which Molto does as well. Elsewhere, Rusty receives a call from Rigo, and she tells him she just got a DNA match on the second DNA set that was found at Bunny Davis's crime scene years ago, and the DNA belongs to a man named Brian Ratzer. Rusty and Rigo go to this man's house, and they don't get much out of him, but Rusty is suspicious he may be Carolyn's true killer and possibly Liam's accomplice from back in the day. Rusty then goes and sits down with Maya one more time, and they go over in detail everything that happened that night because she wants to put a time frame on the murder because the coroner wasn't able to decipher an accurate time of death. He was drunk at the bar because she ended things, but then she called him to come over, presumably to tell him she was pregnant. But they just ended up fighting before she could tell him, and he left after 51 minutes, which was around 9 p.m. A few days later, Raymond meets with the prosecution and tells Nico and Molto they have no factual evidence and don't have a case to stand on. But then Nico tosses him a file that shocks Raymond. He then calls Rusty immediately and tells him his DNA was found under Carolyn's fingernails after they did a second testing. Rusty is in shock, but then a drunk Brian Ratzer starts angrily banging on his door for harassing him at home earlier, and Rusty goes outside and beats him to a pulp. Episode 5. Pregame. Eugenia, Rusty's assistant in the office, talks with Molto, who tells her she has to take the stand during the trial, whether she wants to or not, and has to be completely honest about everything. He even asks if they had an intimate relationship, and she quickly denies, but says she knew about Rusty and Carolyn. She even witnessed it a few times. Rusty meets with Raymond, and is appalled when he learns what Rusty did to Brian, and Brian might press charges against him. Rusty says he won't because it might expose him for being Carolyn's true killer, but Raymond doesn't see it that way. Rusty still thinks Brian and Liam Reynolds are accomplices, but Raymond says to worry about his own mess right now. Let the police do their job. Meanwhile, at home, Jaden asks her mom if she thinks her dad would be capable of murder. Barbara says he might have a temper, but she doesn't think he would be able to take a life, especially someone he loves. Later, she tells her father she's scared of losing him, but he promises everything will sort itself out. Back over to Molto, who has a memory of Carolyn telling him she would rather work with Rusty over him as it would be better for her career, and we can tell this didn't sit right with him, and this might be the resentment Molto has for Rusty. He loved Carolyn too, but she chose Rusty. Meanwhile, Brian Ratzer meets with Rusty, Raymond, and Maya to clear the air, and he says he used to hire escorts back in the day, and he believes Bunny Davis may have been one of them. But he didn't hurt her, and he doesn't even know who Liam Reynolds is, even after seeing a photo of him. After Brian leaves, Raymond tells Rusty that they need to shift their attention away from Brian and worry about proving his innocence at the moment, not investigating Carolyn's death, as the trial begins the next day. The following day, opening statements are given, and Molto really pushes home that Rusty killed Carolyn, and he's going to prove it without a reasonable doubt. Episode 6. The Elements. The district coroner, Dr. Kumagai, takes a stand, and he tells that court that Carolyn was most likely killed by a thin, blunt object, and if he had to guess, she was killed with her fire poker, as it was nowhere to be found in her house. Kumagai insinuates that since Rusty's DNA was found underneath Carolyn's fingernails, that's pretty damning, as there were no defensive wounds. But then Raymond gets up and baits Kumagai into losing his temper and proving to the court that Kumagai had a grudge against Rusty that goes back years. Later, Nico is not happy with Molto because that was supposed to be their witness, and now it helped out the defense, not them. A second forensic pathologist takes the stand and shows the court the DNA they found underneath her fingernails and how his saliva was found on her body. When Raymond cross-examines, he explains that DNA can easily be found under someone's fingernails just by grabbing their face for a kiss, and a kiss would also explain the reason for his saliva being found on her body, which the pathologist doesn't argue. Another win for the defense. Eugenia then takes the stand and she tells the court about different times she saw Carolyn and Rusty hooking up, but also saw them fighting quite a bit. She thought Rusty was getting too attached and didn't like what Carolyn was turning him into because she played with his heart a lot. When Maya cross-examines, Eugenia tells the court that Carolyn made a formal complaint to HR about a colleague being unprofessional in the past. But the court is shocked when Eugenia says the complaint was for Tommy Molto, not Rusty Sabich. But she doesn't know what the complaint was about. After court that day, Judge Little informs both parties that she has granted the prosecution's request to allow Michael Caldwell to testify, even though he is underage. They must proceed with caution when he is testifying. When he takes the stand, he says he went to his mom's house quite often because he was angry she didn't want him in her life, and he wanted to see what was more important than her own son. He saw Rusty visit once or twice a month, and he explains why he took pictures of them. He tells the court what he told Molto earlier about his mom telling him at lunch how she was afraid of someone at work, but never got a name. He assumed it was Rusty because who else would it have been? He flat out accuses Rusty of murdering his mom, and the judge begs him not to state opinions while testifying. When Raymond cross-examines, he has a health scare and he goes into cardiac arrest and is rushed to the hospital. Episode 7. The Witness. At the hospital, Raymond is operated on, and after the doctors are done, they tell everyone that it wasn't a heart attack. It was a neurological issue, and he has a pacemaker now and is going to make it, which relieves everyone. But that means he won't be able to continue with the case, and when both parties meet with the judge, she offers a mistrial, which Nico thinks they should accept, and Molto disagrees with. Rusty then declares that he will represent himself the rest of the trial, and Maya will serve as his second chair. Court starts back up, and Rusty cross-examines Michael, and it gets emotional, and Michael's answers really start to eat at Rusty, and he has trouble containing his emotions in front of the jury. Rusty comes out and accuses Michael and his father of setting him up, but the judge immediately stops the line of questioning. The next witness to take the stand is Rigo, and Nico is the lawyer questioning her. He plays a recording to the court of the day. Rigo and Rusty went to visit Liam Reynolds in prison, and on the recording, you can clearly hear Rusty trying to bribe Liam with freedom into giving him an accomplice for Carolyn's murder, which does not look good for Rusty. Rigo also testifies, which she doesn't want to do, but is an officer to the court, that whenever Rusty first got Carolyn's case, he asked Rigo to only give him the case evidence and to not let anyone else see it, which Rusty argues is pretty typical for a prosecutor and detective relationship. But apparently, by injecting his own opinion/testimony as his own counsel, he opened himself up to be called as a witness, and Molto tells the judge he has to take the stand now if called. The judge offers Rusty a mistrial once again, but he declines and says he will take the stand, which angers Maya so much that she quits the case. That night, Rusty practices in the mirror what he will say when he takes the stand the following morning, and as an officer to the court, he knows he can't lie, no matter how bad it appears. The following day in court, Rusty is shocked to see Raymond and Maya are both back to help him win his freedom. Molto questions him first and really annihilates Rusty on the stand and shows the court and the jury all of the damning text between Carolyn and Rusty the past year, and it does not look great, that is for sure. Molto also proves that Rusty has an anger management problem and snapped one night, but Rusty continues to maintain his innocence through it all. After court, Nico tells Molto they have this in the bag after Molto's great day in court. When Molto gets home, his place is trashed, and he finds Carolyn's missing fireplace poker with a note that says to go F himself. Episode 8. The Verdict. Season Finale. The police arrive at Molto's house, and he tells Nico he knows it was Rusty who put the fireplace poker there because he's upset he's going to spend life in prison. The next day in court, Raymond questions a second doctor who says she would put the time of death between 1 and 3 a.m. because the food found in her body was completely digested and she ordered takeout around 8 p.m. And Rusty left around 9, and this is a win for the defense as they needed one badly. Later that day, when the defense team is meeting, Rusty tells Raymond and Maya he wants to give the closing statement, which they don't agree with, but since it is his life on the line, they go with it. While practicing, Jaden is still scared about everything, but her father says he's done closing statements hundreds of times, and he knows that he is innocent, so he's got this. The following day, Rusty gives a powerful closing statement, admitting he betrayed his family, his friends, and everyone else close to him by putting them through this whole ordeal, but proclaims his innocence and that he loved Carolyn and would never hurt her. He says there is no factual evidence he did anything and everything is circumstantial and is being done by a prosecutor who just flat out doesn't like him because Carolyn picked him over Molto. When Molto gives his statement, he says everything points to Rusty, and there isn't even another lead, and he's proven the violent nature and aggressiveness Rusty has shown, just in the courtroom alone. The jury deliberates for 6 hours, and when the verdict is read, Rusty Sabich is found not guilty. Rusty gives a press conference saying they still have work to do and they need to find Carolyn's real killer, who is still out there. At home that night, Rusty confronts Barbara, and he tells her he's known since the beginning that it was her that killed Carolyn, and he never said a word because he didn't want to destroy their family. Carolyn is confused, but then Jaden walks into the room and says Mom didn't do it, she did. Jaden tells them both what happened that night. She went to Carolyn's house after she found out about the affair to tell her to stay away from her dad. But when Carolyn said she's having his baby so that won't happen, Jaden lost it and beat her to death with her fire poker. She buried the fire poker and then later planted it in Molto's apartment as she hated him for what he was doing to her dad. Rusty and Barbara are shocked, but Rusty says they will never speak of this again and this will make them stronger as a family. And that is how Season 1 of Presumed Innocent ends. Season 2 is set to release in late 2026, so I hope you can check that one out as well. Thanks for watching.